Hello everybody, and welcome to this Biggerplate webinar. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started there. I'm just having a couple of issues with my microphone. It's late on a Thursday evening here, so the technology was obviously feeling a bit tired. So welcome to this webinar, which is focused on mind mapping for students. I'm delighted to have you with me today, wherever you're joining from in the world. It'd be great to know, those of you on the call, who you are and where you're coming from today. And if you have any questions throughout, you can of course pop them into the questions panel, the Q&A panel here in Zoom. So I'm going to jump straight into our presentation just so I can keep it nice and brief and hopefully not keep any of you too long. And we're going to start up here in welcome, and then we're going to move clockwise as you're looking at the mind map around the screen. And hopefully I can just give you some perspectives on how mind mapping might help you if you are a current or even potential student. So welcome first and foremost. As I say, my name is Liam Hughes. I'm the founder of Biggerplate.com. I started Biggerplate when I was at university, so again, I'm going to rely a lot on my own experiences as a student, even though it's some time ago. My email address is there on the screen if you'd like to contact me after this session, ask any questions about mind mapping or Biggerplate. I'd be happy to hear from you. You can also follow me, find me on Twitter if you are using that particular social media platform. Biggerplate.com, for those of you who are not familiar, is a pretty well-known site now in the company really in the space for mind mapping. And our origins, as I sort of alluded to just a second ago, are really based on my experience as a student. I was a pretty average student. I was having a lot of fun, but not really studying very hard. And I was suddenly confronted with the reality of a lot of exams coming up, and being told that if I didn't pass those exams, I would be asked to leave the university. And I basically had sort of 2-3 weeks really to try and save my degree. So I had to try and cram in a lot of information into my mind to just try and scrape past these exams. And I'd never really encountered mind mapping before. The only times I'd ever seen it was when I was at school, and occasionally a teacher might say do a mind mapping assignment, but really they never really told us what that meant. And it usually just meant lots of colors on a page and not really much understanding of what we were trying to do. So I was introduced to mind mapping software in relation to my university degree just by coincidence. Somebody said to me, well, why don't you try this? This might help you. And for me, this really changed everything and was really the basis for me starting Biggerplate. This really unlocked information for me in terms of being able to organize it and understand it. And really, I would say mind mapping software kind of saved my university degree. That's where the idea for Biggerplate came from. What I originally set out to do was create a resource for students. I thought it would be really great if students could find academic information, but in a mind map format, which was proving to be so powerful for me in terms of helping me to visually summarize a lot of information. So that was the original idea. Biggerplate launched in 2008. So as you can see, we've been around for 12 and a bit years so far, and hopefully we'll be around for many years to come. The reason I just share all that is the origin of Biggerplate is around students and studying. Even though now we're known more for our sort of support for businesses, mind mapping for students is still really a very core part of sort of our story. Today, Biggerplate is known for 3 things: templates, tutorials, and training. Templates is really the heart of Biggerplate, and that's where thousands of free mind maps exist and have been created and shared by members from all over the world in business education and all sorts of different areas. And you can access and download those mind maps for free with Biggerplate membership. And that's a great way of understanding sort of what other people are doing with mind mapping. It can be a great start point for your own studying, your own exploration of a subject. And of course, you can also share your own mind maps if you're creating them. So we'd love to see what you create. We're also known and providing a lot of tutorials. So whether that's things like this live webinar or our pre-recorded webinars that exist on the site, or previously recorded pro webinars, loads of great insight into the practical uses of mind mapping, not just in education, but in a whole range of use cases where our members from around the world are sharing what they are doing with mind mapping tools and techniques. So a great source of learning there. And finally, we provide a lot of training around mind mapping through workshops and webinars for organizations around the world, including occasionally some universities, occasionally some schools, but we're more focused on that sort of university level when it comes to education training. But training for teachers in schools, yep, we can do that as well. So we do a lot of things, but it's all with that focus of helping individuals and organizations get the most out of mind mapping techniques. So what is about this webinar? Who's it for? Really, we're aiming this at probably students at sort of college and university level, perhaps also applying to some of those people, students at sort of later stages of high school. But I think sort of I can't really speak too much to younger than that because that's not my experience, and they're probably better placed people to talk about that. What I'm really talking about is when your education level reaches a certain stage where the information you're supposed to take in and make sense of starts to get really quite high, and lots of students, myself included, were never really told or given techniques to how to manage all of that extra information that we were having to learn once we got to sort of 16, 17, 18 years old and above. I'm hoping this session will also be useful for any educators, teachers, lecturers, or sort of coaches, whatever it might be, who are maybe helping to support or teach students in different subject areas. And maybe you'll get a sense of how mind mapping might be able to help you in your delivery of education, and also how you might support students if they try to adopt mind mapping as part of their kind of study techniques. So I'm going to look today at sort of 3 simple uses for students. There are, of course, more, but I just want to kind of talk about 3 that, again, were particularly pertinent to me back in my studying time, and just look at note-taking with mind maps, knowledge building with mind maps, and then essays or written assignments using mind maps. So that's what I'm going to look at today. In each section, I'm going to just have a little bit of a nostalgic think about some of the challenges I faced, and then I'm going to talk about how mind mapping helped to try and illustrate what you can do with it, and then I'm going to give you a really quick overview of kind of how you can do it yourself, or just some things to keep in mind. Again, just a very overview sort of webinar here. Questions you have at any point in time, if you have any questions that you want to just drop in, you can do that using the Q&A panel in Zoom, and it'd be great to have some questions that I can try and engage with or respond to if there are any. Sometimes there aren't any, that's not a problem either. It just depends on who's on the call and how much they kind of want to know. But you can drop your questions in any time to the Q&A panel, and I will try and answer them either as I present or at the very end of the webinar. So let's take a look first at this use case of note-taking for mind maps. Well, my challenges at university around note-taking were several. So firstly, I had a very short attention span. I kind of still do. I get quite easily distracted. My mind drifts. I sort of just daydream quite a lot. And that meant it was quite challenging sometimes for me to follow the lecturer, the teacher, whatever it might be. I also have and still have very bad handwriting. I write very messy written notes, and sometimes that meant reading my own notes later was actually quite challenging. I couldn't necessarily tell what I was trying to capture in my own notes, which was pretty challenging. And then also one of the challenges I had, and I think most people have, is we have no control over how the lecturer or the teacher or the presenter delivers their content. Sometimes they are very good at presenting and explaining information. Sometimes they are not so good. They can jump around a lot. They can be fast or slow. So the highly sort of variable nature of how teachers or educators kind of deliver their content meant you kind of had to be able to respond to different types of delivery. And again, I wasn't very well equipped to do that using my messy hand-drawn notes. So here's how mind mapping kind of helped me with that. The first thing is mind mapping during my lectures or my sort of lessons really helped me with sort of simultaneously taking notes, but also making sense of information. So as I'm capturing information in the mind map live in the session, just using sort of simple keyboard sort of typing and entering my information, what I was doing was capturing better notes. They were tidier than my handwriting, but also I was much more able to make sense of how things connected up because of the structure of the mind map. So immediately as I'm building out my mind map, I'm starting to get a much better sense of what belongs together, the hierarchy of information, and importantly, it was all on one page, whereas written notes were being sort of divided over several note pages. And even if you're writing text in something like a Word document, using a laptop in lessons or lectures, even that again is just a big linear list, and it's not quite so easy to see the connections between information. I also found using mind mapping, I was able to actually, what's going on with this mouse today? It just keeps moving things off. I actually found I was able to capture less information or write less. I was capturing the same amount, but actually more, but I was writing fewer words. So because I was just focused on capturing just the keywords, not writing big full sentences, I found I was easier to keep up. And that meant I was capturing more information, but in fewer words, if that makes sense. So I found it much easier to keep up with what was being said because I wasn't putting so much pressure on myself to try and write word for word or long sentences to explain myself. Key benefit of mind mapping as a note-taking tool is it's got that built-in structure. So everything you add into the mind map is already connected to something else. And that helps to really give your information some hierarchy and some structure, but also helps you understand pieces of information in relation to other pieces of information. So it helps you see particular piece of information with a bit of context around it based on where it is located and how it is located in the mind map. So again, that's really going to start to help with that understanding of the concepts rather than just scribbling them out without really being able to think about how they fit into the overall schematic of information. The other thing that's sort of one of the real sort of superpowers of mind mapping is the ability to just edit and move information much quicker than in any other tool, whether it's handwritten notes or sort of typing linear notes. The ability to capture the information in mind maps software, just like this, just kind of typing as you go. But then importantly, the ability to sort of move things around and make sense of that information either sort of live during the session or even just after the session, and just taking a little bit of time to just say, actually, I think these things belong here, or maybe they're part of another topic that I hadn't thought of that I'm going to actually rename and put all of these things into here. And the ability to just move things around so it makes until it makes as much sense as possible to you is very, very powerful. And again, is going to just help you to get your head around a subject as opposed to just rereading lots of notes that don't really help you get a sense of how that holistic information sort of fits together. So that's kind of how mind mapping helped me. So how might you kind of do that yourself if you're thinking about going to try and do mind mapping for your note taking in lessons and lectures? Well, the first thing is to just go and try it. There's nothing to lose. And if you just get a bit of practice in, you'll find it's actually very easy to just capture information and start to build it up. So you can kind of think about it maybe in kind of two ways. One is where you maybe have very structured presentations or a structured lecture or lesson. And that's where the presenter or the teacher has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. So they might say, in this lesson, I'm going to talk about this topic, followed by this topic, followed by this topic. Well, as they say that, they're kind of giving you the key branches of your mind map straight away. And then the mind map, as they move through their beginning, middle, and end, you're just capturing, and really your map is going to reflect the chronology of that lecture and that lesson, how they move through the topics. So I'd always suggest to you that you build and read mind maps clockwise, just like we are in this map. If I just zoom out a little bit too far there. We started up here with welcome. We're moving our way around here. We're going to come round here, and then we're going to come round to the bottom and then finish up in this top left. So as you build a mind map, think about it going around the clock face like the time you're watching on the clock in your lesson. Your mind map is going to kind of reflect that structure nice and easily. Quick example of that from a lecture I went to see more recently, not at university, was just a sort of business lecture I went to. And this is where the speaker was a very good speaker. His name is Daniel Pink. He's an author, very good speaker, and very interesting guy. But all I was doing here using another mind mapping tool was following the presentation, and you'll see the structure of it is very much ordered chronologically because he was a very good speaker who said, here's my introduction, here's the first topic I want to talk about, now the second, now the third, here's my wrap up, and here's the space for questions. So my mind map follows the chronology of his speaking. So when he's into talking about patterns of day, he's then just giving me some nice key headings, and I'm just building out this mind map as I go. And I'm sometimes moving things around and saying, actually, I think this needs to belong here, or maybe mood comes before research, or whatever it is. And my map is just following the chronology, which is really easy to do when the presenter has a nice structure to their topic. But what about the opposite? What about some of those maybe less structured lectures? And sometimes that can be because the lecturer is trying to have more interaction and maybe was trying to talk with the other participants in the room. Sometimes it's just because they're not great at presenting and they just think they can talk unstructured and it'll make sense to everyone else. That's tricky to follow. So here what we've got to focus on a little bit more is probably what I would say is concepts over chronology. So rather than thinking about the order in which things are said, you focus a little bit more on how much they are said, or which things kind of are bubbling up to be sounding like the most important topic. So don't think so much about how they are coming, just capture the information as it comes. So as the information is coming out, you just keep typing, keep building the mind map. Again, remember, it's really easy to move things around. So just keep capturing, even if you don't entirely understand what you're capturing, because you don't quite know where the lecture is going with this thread, just keep capturing, group what you can, keep sorting, resorting, moving things around, just doing these very quick things in the mind map. And eventually what you'll find is some structure will emerge. If you can keep capturing information, structure will emerge in your mind map. You'll start to get a sense of what the big ideas are. And that's when, again, you will then start to move those big ideas probably into that middle part of your map so they become the big kind of key topics in your mind map. But again, you may not recognize that something's a big idea almost until the end of the lecture, when you realize this is the topic the person's been talking about. The structure will also emerge, and you'll start to see what are the small details and also what's the relevant stuff. So again, be brave in refining and sort of moving that information around and removing irrelevant information. Follow the tangents, keep capturing if the person is talking about something you can't quite figure out if it's relevant. Keep capturing, keep taking notes. But if it really doesn't appear to be relevant by the time that tangent finishes, take it out of your mind map. Don't take that clutter with you. Now, again, in the mind map, that's really easy to just say, delete that whole section. Whereas again, in sort of more traditional written notes, you're thinking about, right, where do I cut this paragraph? How do I take that bit out without losing the rest of it and all this sort of stuff? So be pretty kind of brave in removing information from your note taking. And that will also help to sort of surface those big main topics, the things that are mentioned very often or referred back to. So finally, on note taking, just a few kind of final tips. Firstly, trust your brain. Using a mind map, you'll see I'm just in this map alone, just using only 2 or 3 words at a time in my mind map, but I'm very capable of speaking around this topic without having much more information on the page. Now, that's not just because I've done it a lot of times, it's because my brain is kind of very good at just filling in the blanks. I only need a couple of keywords and the structure of the mind map, and kind of my brain fills in the rest for me. It understands, because of how this stuff is ordered and logically structured, it knows kind of a lot more than is actually showing on the page there. Remember a lot more, even if you are only capturing a few keywords at a time in your notes. Think about using icons in your note taking, and you may not be able to do this straight away if you're focused on note taking in the moment, but afterwards it can be a really good idea to just take 5 minutes to review your note taking map and just put in some of these maybe little icons that just say, okay, maybe there was some word or concepts that I don't understand, so I'm going to mark that with this little frowny face, and that's my little visual signal to myself that I'm going to need to look that up later. Go and ask a question about that. I might mark out things maybe that really emerged as key concepts, things I need to understand for my subject. So I might mark them with a star or a green flag or something. And again, other little flags and things you might just use to kind of start to mark up your map and help you with sort of whatever comes next. So marking key books, key references, key authors, all in your note-taking map. You can do that really simply with mind mapping software, just using sort of simple menus and saying, okay, let's add a green flag into here, or take it out, whatever we might want. So using these little icons is a great way of giving yourself some little reminders later on. And you may find that really comes in handy when you are trying to revise and remember this content several weeks, perhaps after that lecture. The little visual signals that tell you, look here, this is important, that's going to really help you when it comes around to exam time. Most important tip around mind mapping for note taking is to just keep practicing. You will get better at doing it, and I really recommend a little sort of way of getting practice is to just map some videos, like a YouTube video or TED Talks, and just kind of practice and get comfortable with just capturing lots of information in a mind map and then moving it around and making sense of it as you go. A little bit of practice goes a long way, and this really isn't very tricky. To just get started with a blank mind map is just using keys like insert and return and typing. So very, very simple stuff. You don't need to write big, long sentences, so you don't even need to be that fast with your typing. So go and give note-taking and mind mapping a try. Very easy to do, and you'll really be grateful you've done it when it comes around to those exam times later and you've got to go and review all of the notes that you were supposed to be making in lectures. So as we get towards our exams, what we're really going to be needing to have done is build our knowledge of a subject. So rather than just taking lots of notes, what we really want those notes to be doing is informing our understanding of a subject in its totality and the topics within that subject. So knowledge building with mind mapping is, again, an area that I found, or knowledge building without mind mapping rather, is something I found quite tricky. The challenges I had at university were around exam preparation. I had lots of revision to do. I had lots of content and never very much time. I always left it too late to do my exam preparation. And when I came round to do that exam preparation, I had very weak foundations. I had very poor quality notes because of my bad handwriting. I had a very incoherent system of annotation. So there's little icons and things that you do really nicely in mind mapping. I didn't really have a system like that in my notes. It was just sort of random squiggles and stars to mark something. Or quite simply, my notes didn't exist. I maybe missed a lecture, or I didn't take any notes during the lecture because I couldn't keep up. Of course, also what I was struggling with was bad filing and storage. Now, I was at university just at a period where there was still sort of pen and paper note-taking, as well as more people using laptops, but filing and storage might be less of an issue now. That I think most people are probably taking their notes on computers or iPads, that sort of stuff. But back then I had a real challenge of, do I even have any notes from this lecture? So I was losing a lot of time searching for notes and looking for any references that I may have taken. Perhaps the most important thing from a subject matter learning perspective is all of the concepts were quite disconnected. I had a pile of notes over here talking about one concept. I maybe had a half set of notes over here on another concept. I had another concept over here where I maybe had no notes. But really what I struggled to do was connect those concepts together so I understood the subject in its entirety. So either within notes or between notes and lectures, I was really struggling to kind of take a global understanding of my subject that was obviously going to help me when it came to exams and assignments. So how mind mapping helped me? Well, firstly, before exams, it helped me to get off the blank page. So I sort of would create a mind map about the particular topic that I knew was going to be in the exam. And even if I didn't feel like I knew much about it, I would just start to put into the mind map anything that I could think of or anything that I could pick out of my rubbish notes and just start to build up a mind map, even if there really wasn't very much there. The key thing is this didn't really feel like work at first. It just felt like a bit of sort of, you know, throwing things into a thing, and I didn't even know if it was going to help me when I first started doing this. So all I was doing at this stage was just gathering whatever I know. It was actually quite reassuring to say, well, I do know something. Even if I don't feel like I know very much about this subject, I do know something. And what it was really providing for me was kind of a scaffolding for me to go and learn what else I didn't know. So by building it into this visual structure, I started to see the gaps in, maybe I had a topic, but I didn't have any information coming off it. Well, that was a good signal to me to go and find some information and bring that into my mind map. So it was really helping to sort of surface and show me where the biggest gaps in my knowledge were, and therefore where I should go and try and do some extra research and pull things into it. The other thing it really helped me with was converting the notes. So I started to bring everything into one place. I was therefore able to kind of connect up that information better and then really start to understand the topic and the subject overall, because everything started to become in one place instead of being scattered in different notes, folders, files on my computer or whatever. I just started to kind of condense it all into one place in a mind map. And that really, really helped me to understand the subject much, much better. How would you do this yourself? Well, here's a couple of kind of suggestions based on kind of what I used to do. The first thing I would suggest is creating a subject master map. So if you take your subject maybe as history, think about creating just a subject master map. Then what we're going to do is create sort of specific topic maps beneath that. So if you think of subject as history, topics could be the civil rights movement in America. A topic could be World War II. A topic could be apartheid South Africa in history. All these things are topics within the overall subject of history. So think about starting with a subject map. And this is where you may also start to just kind of break out your module structure. And it's also where you can collect key concepts and headlines. So for me, I created a master map for my subject at university, which was sociology. And I'll show you a version of that in just a moment, just so you can see what that looks like. And this is really your sort of overarching view of your subject. Underneath the master map, then I started to create specific topic maps. And this is really where I started to get into the detail of a particular topic. So this is where I'm really building on my notes, filling in the gaps, and really building out a much more comprehensive amount of information about one particular topic within my subject. This is also where I started to do more research, and as I tried to fill in the blanks, I was maybe pulling in references from websites, from books, authors, whatever it might be, into the specific topic maps. And also I started to also keep track in this topic map around some of my personal organization, the assignment info, the exam information, and kind of what else I needed to keep track of. What I was then able to do between these two maps was then link them together. So I was able to sort of, in my master map, tell myself, if you want to look for more detail about this particular topic, go over here and I would open up another mind map with a lot more detail in it. So that's kind of how I'm going to show you in just a moment. So a couple of tips before I do is to use the topic notes and links in mind mapping software. So notes and links are two really, really powerful features of all good mind mapping software that enables you to capture a lot of extra information without creating a lot of clutter in your mind map. So notes is a really nice function whereby you can just, on any topic, we can actually just say, for example, in this software, we want to add some notes. It's going to pop open a little text document where we can add lots of extra info. So you see I can just add this in here, but when I click away from that topic, it just hides it all, but it's got a little icon there that tells me, Liam, you've got some extra information below the surface here. This is a great feature for capturing lots of extra information. So I used to use it to capture quotations from journals or from essays or whatever it was. I would capture quotations, bits of text, blocks of text, and put it in here, or citations I would save in my notes. But again, my mind map would stay pretty clean and clear because it was all just put beneath the surface. So even though I've only got one word here, two words here, just beneath the surface, I've got a huge amount of extra information, but I'm not getting overwhelmed by that. And that really helps you with managing a lot of information at any given time. Oops, jumped away there, sorry. Wrong button. The other function we can use in mind mapping software, which is very powerful for, again, connecting up information, is linking. So we can use links in our mind maps to link to websites, to link to other files on our computer, or to link to folders, whatever it might be. And this, again, is a really great way of connecting up your information. So even if the key document you want to reference is maybe a Word document you saved on your computer, you can just insert a little link in the mind map that will take you straight to that document and open it up for you. So I'll show you again how that will work in just a moment. Another key kind of tip for building your knowledge maps is to kind of think of it as creating a single source of truth for a particular topic. You want to be pulling everything into these subject maps so you can be really confident I haven't missed anything or left anything lying around anywhere else. It's all in this subject or this topic map. So if I can get my head around this topic map, if I can learn the basics of what's in this map, I'm going to be in a good place to kind of pass my exams and understand my subject. So the other thing to just get into habit of doing is when you go and do a lecture and listen to a lecture, do your note taking, try if you can to then just do that extra step of pulling it into one system afterwards, connecting up the dots between your master map and your detail maps, just so you've got everything in one place. And again, you'll be really grateful when it comes around to exam time because you'll have everything where you need it and ready to dive into the learning and the studying before the exams. And you'll be really grateful that you've taken the time every sort of day, every week to just connect this information up. So here's how that kind of worked for me when I was at university. Now, I don't actually have the original master map of my sociology degree. I don't know what's happened to it, but it disappeared. But I've kind of created what it looked like just to illustrate the point. And then I'll just show you, these are real maps. These are the topic maps. So that up here is the subject master map. And down here are the topic maps. And I'll just show you how I kind of connected those up together. So this is the map I created just for this session, but this is really a replica of what I had at university. So if I just open that up, what you'll see here is a map where in one term, I had 3 modules to cover. I was covering a module on crime and justice, global politics, and the sociology of religion. So I had 3 topics here, quite different in terms of their focus, but all obviously connected under the subject of sociology. So within each of these, this is my sort of highest level view of the mind map. So I had my module structure, and then within each module, I was just starting to capture, okay, who are the key figures sociologically that I need to keep track of around crime and justice? Or in global politics, who might the key figures be? Sociology of religion, oops, keep doing that, I'm not sure what's going on there. Who are the key figures I need to know? And again, under this, I'm just putting in what are a couple of the key concepts. So again, I would just capture the headline information, the headline reminders for myself. So again, this isn't a proper map anymore, but all I would be doing is for each kind of key figure, just keeping these little categories of concepts and books, things I would need to remember so that I knew sort of what I should be looking up, what to reference, etc., for any given topic. I'd then be breaking down the topics within the module. So here's a thing about the underclass, here's another thing about imprisonment. So again, for each of these kind of topics, global politics, I would then have subtopics, but it was all being managed from within this master mind map. So what that meant is at any given time, I could jump across to another mind map which had, for example, the detail. So if I click this little link, it's going to just open up a different mind map, which was my map of details about this topic, which was the underclass. And you'll see here, this is where I started to use a lot of that extra functionality around notes and hyperlinks. So this is my detail map about this particular topic. And this probably would have started with me taking notes in a lecture about underclass. So then it becomes a research map, and you'll see what I've got here are lots of little icons, and this is telling me that I've got some website links. So for example, if I click this is very old, so it may not actually work anymore, I don't know. So this is an electronic journal that apparently that's moved, so the link doesn't work anymore because this is probably 14 years old. But all I've done here, you'll see, is I've used these notes. Again, just like I was illustrating before, I've got lots of information just in these notes. So my mind map is still nice and manageable. There's probably still some few words I could take out if I tried, but I've got a huge range of information here around the key books for the underclass as a subject. And all I'm doing then is linking between my subject map, the blue one, says, Liam, if you want information and you're preparing for an exam where underclass is going to likely be a topic you need to understand, go over here. Here's your research on your learning map. So this is where, again, I started to just connect up the information from my highest level, which is this map, down to those kind of topics. So other sort of maps I had, I've got a case study map about Rwanda, which was one of the case studies I had to learn about for my module. So again, another detailed mind map here, just giving me the history, political context, some of the sort of timetables. In this map, I even had sort of little things to try and help me remember how to spell or just even remember quite tricky names, names that you don't often sort of encounter. So I was trying to remember this name, for example, here, found that quite a tricky one to remember. So I just tried to sort of break it down into something that I would remember. So I broke it down into its component parts in the mind map and just said, okay, I need some little triggers to help me remember the component parts. And that worked very well for me. I was able to then sort of very clearly reference this important part and this important period just with these little sort of reminders. But again, the mind map here is all about the detail. It's where I've just pulled in lots of information about a very wide range of topics. And this is my detail map. And again, it's connected up to my blue map so that as I capture notes in my case study map, I know that in my big map up here, I say if I need to go and look at my Rwanda case study, all of the information is in the map when I open this up. And that's about that single source of truth idea that I said earlier. I know that everything I know about the Rwanda case study is in this other map. And if I'm missing stuff, the other map is going to help me understand what I need to fill in. That's how I started to really sort of build what I called knowledge maps at university that really helped me to understand the subject. And that is what ultimately helped me to pass my exams. I was very late in doing all of this, so I didn't ace the exams, but I managed to pass them, which was a big deal for me. If I had been able to approach my learning like this from the beginning, using mind mapping tools, I would have stood a much better chance of doing much better in exams the whole way through my education. So I really wished I'd known about these tools and maybe used this approach much earlier. So finally, we've done lots of note-taking during our lessons. We've then compiled that information and probably improved it as we start to build up our knowledge maps, both at the master subject level and the individual topic detail levels. The final use case for mind mapping as a student that, again, I found very, very powerful was around essays and written assignments. Now, some of you may not have to do that many of these, but I did. Writing essays was kind of a pretty big part of my degree. It's a sort of written subject, sociology. So I had to do quite a lot of essays. And the challenges I had around essays were sort of different versions of the same thing. So in terms of researching what I was going to put into my essays, I am a very slow reader, so it takes me a long time to read information. I had very poor notes. We already covered that. I wasn't taking good notes, which meant when I went to go prepare to write an assignment, I was relying on very poor quality notes as the basis of my information. And again, my information was spread out all over the place. I didn't have these nice, comprehensive knowledge maps that I was just showing you at the early stages. So research was the challenge, and then writing was the second part of the challenge. And really, there was never much structure to my written assignments. And I was quite often, the feedback I would get from my lecturers and my teachers was, this is just like a sort of dump of all your thoughts. It's not really structured into a particularly compelling set of arguments. So that was a real challenge for me. And what I also was feeling when I was writing this stuff was I really didn't have much sense of a kind of a clear flow of the information, because I couldn't really see the whole. I was scrolling up and down in Microsoft Word documents and really kind of just losing myself a bit, which is why it didn't really have much structure. It was sort of a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But I was jumping between sections. I couldn't really get a sense of the whole narrative that I was trying to put together. And as a result, it reads sort of as a bit of an unstructured mess. So research and writing, if I think about written assignments in those two phases, I'm going to just say how mind mapping can help with both of those two stages. Firstly, on the research side, again, we can use the same principles talked about earlier about having everything in one place. And if you've built those knowledge maps, you've sort of already done part of that. You've pulled together the key ideas, key concepts. You've linked together quotations, notes, and journals using this functionality. You've found websites of relevance. And again, you've saved website links. And this is really where you're building on the knowledge map. So the better those knowledge maps are, the more capable you're going to be to just jump straight into your research and structuring of an essay or a written assignment. The second way that mind mapping helped me is with the structure. It helped me to organize the ideas and the information. I was able to organize and sort and reorder, move things around and just say, actually, I think I need to be talking about this before I talk about that. And maybe this belongs at the beginning rather than in the middle. And just keep moving around the information until I had a sense of how that narrative or that argument was going to sort of progress as a whole. And this was really about seeing the structure of the essay before I actually started writing anything. I was building out the ideas in that clockwise around the clock map structure, in thinking about the chronology of the introduction, then a first paragraph, then a second paragraph, all the way around until I got to sort of conclusions. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. So how to do this yourself? Well, I again would break it into two stages. I would think firstly in terms of creating a mind map specifically for the assignment. So create a mind map that's just your scratch pad, here's all my ideas. And just think about this being based on kind of your key ideas, your concepts, gathering information together. It might become quite big and it might be a little bit messy. That's okay. This is where you're going to do your thinking and your planning and your sort of pulling together the research that's going to potentially go into your final mind map. But this is also going to contain lots of ideas and information that may not make it into your final essay. It's where you're going to gather everything and decide what actually is going to make the cut. So once you've got a sort of research map going, then we really want to get into our essay planning. And this is where we start to structure those ideas. We're going to start pulling the good ones out of our research map and into our planning map. So we're going to have two maps, and I would sort of, if I've got a big screen in front of me like this, I would have one on one side and one on the other side. And I would be looking at my research map and saying, I think this idea needs to go into my planning and actually become part of my essay. So I would just be copying and pasting or typing whatever it needed to just start to build up a bit of a chronology of what I was going to say. My introduction, then this, now this, and here's my conclusion. So using a kind of two-part approach, thinking about the sort of planning map, the research map and then the planning map will really be a good way of making sure by the time you get to the written document, you've done a really good progression of your thinking and your ideas. A couple of quick tips. Again, use those topic notes and those links to add more detail, to keep the surface of your map clear. And I'm going to show you an example of how I did that in a real mind map of one of the essays I wrote at university, just to show you how you can use, again, those notes and things to keep your map nice and manageable and add a huge amount of extra information below. Particularly useful for your research map. Then finally, also really think about using a great feature that exists in lots of the mind mapping software, which is actually to export your mind map into a Microsoft Word document. And that really then means what you've done in the mind map is organize your structure and your ideas, and then you're sending it into Microsoft Word really just to do the editing and the printing of the document. You're not trying to organize and think in Microsoft Word. You've done all of that in your mind map, and now it's just a case of finishing the editing and sort of making it a written document. I'll show you again how that's going to work in just a moment. So couple of kind of quick examples. Here's a sort of example of a research map, and then I've got an example of a map that I did to actually sort of plan the essay. So I think we looked at this map earlier. This is my underclass map. So I had an essay to write about the topic of the underclass. I think the essay question is actually in here. So here's my question that I was going to have to answer in one essay. So I put the question in one of the notes in the middle. And then this just was my research map. So here are some books I found. Here are some of the key points they were making. Again, here are some of the names that I needed to look at. And again, I captured a huge amount of extra information in here, part one. And each one of these, you see, has got a lot of notes. And I'm just pulling and typing and writing myself, and sometimes copying and pasting probably little citations from pages. You see there it says page 3, and it's kind of just giving me little notes to pull into my research map. This isn't what's all going to go into my essay, but this is all the sort of research that's helping me think through how I'm going to try and answer the question. So this is an example of the research part of that two-part process. Unfortunately, I don't have the planning map that followed on from the underclass research. What I have got is the planning map for a different essay I had to write. So again, if you think about the different structure, I had my research map for my imprisonment essay, and then I had an actual map that was really about structuring what am I going to put into this written piece. This should just load here, hopefully. Okay, so this is where you're just going to see, if I just collapse this down a little bit, I structured this much more chronologically. So it started with introduction, and then I went to first paragraph, and then I went to second paragraph, and so on and so forth, working my way clockwise around the map, filling in ideas around what I think I was going to need to say and in what order. And this is where, again, the ability to just start moving information around, and maybe I start to look at this order, and I think, actually, I think this belongs before that. So I might just move that and say, actually, this is going to be my first, and this is going to be my second. So the ability to just move that information around, or even if I said, actually, I think I want to have this right at the end as my conclusion, I could just restructure and reorganize my mind map either at that sort of big topic level headings, or sort of even within these sort of sections. So even again, when I'm looking at my first paragraph, I could actually say, well, I've broken that down again into 1 and 2, but maybe I want to go this way around instead. Or maybe I'm going to say that comes first, then that goes first. Sorry, that goes first. So moving the structure of my ideas around in the mind map is a really great way that I can build out the structure of what I'm going to say before I go into an actual written document. So here again, what I've done is just started to write out proper long sentences. So different to what I talked about earlier, because here we are actually starting to think about what sentences we're going to want to write, or big quotations that we're going to use to kick off the written assignment. And then I'm just starting to break it down, build it up until I get round to conclusions, which for some reason is missing a branch here. So I must have not quite reached some conclusions. I'm not sure there. So this again is where my research map then starts to inform what's going to go into my essay. Again, I'm not writing the essay in its entirety here, but I'm really starting to think through what's going to go into that final written document. So the final thing just to show you in terms of written assignments is then what I said about being able to send all of this mind map into a Word document so that you don't have to start from scratch in Microsoft Word. And that's very, very powerful and a huge time saver. And what we're really going to do is send all of this structure into a Word document so that all we have to do is then start to do the editing and sort of polishing of that document. So for example, in this particular software, which is Xmind, we can just say, let's export this to a Word document. And it's going to hopefully pop open a little dialogue for me. Maybe. Not quite sure. There we go. It took its time, but here we go. So here's where I can just say, right, I'm going to save it somewhere. And I'm going to call it my crime. Well, let's call it my crime essay, because we're actually going to start creating a written document. I'm going to say to save that. And what the software is doing right now is just going around the map in this order. Oops, sorry. Going around the map clockwise. So again, it's going circular around the map until it gets round to conclusion, and it's converting all of that into a written text document. So if I just flick to my desktop, I've got crime essay here. And what we should now see is the structure reflected. What was in my mind map is now in a written document. So again, I had my introduction, I had my little opening sentence, little note to self, And then I had those two big quotes that I was going to use to sort of reference at the beginning. And everything following that is first paragraph, here's what I want to say, and here's the second and third bits. And again, I've just got a little bit of a mix of things in here. And then all I'm going to start to do in the Word document is probably, for example, I don't want numbering. So let's say, can we take out the numbering like that? So immediately it starts to look a little bit more like an essay. Again, I don't necessarily want the bold and all this sort of stuff. So I'm just going to start then typing and building this out as an essay. But the key thing is, if I zoom right out, I've already got that many pages of sort of my written work is kind of done. And really, this is where the process becomes really about taking things out. And that's a really exciting part of writing an essay, is instead of having to try and build it up, you're now in a process of just refining it and narrowing it down, taking out the extra things and turning it into sort of proper written prose as opposed to sort of bullet points. But a really powerful feature in mind mapping software is the ability to take a huge amount of information, structure it in here, and then do what I just did and send it over to a Word document, really for just that final editing. You've done all of your thinking and organizing of your ideas and your information in a tool that's made for it, which is mind mapping software. And then you've put that into a document tool, which is great for writing, editing, and printing. And it's a great tool for that. The combination of the two is very, very powerful, and hoping will save you lots and lots of time and make life a little bit less stressful when it comes around to those written assignments. So that pretty much wraps us up there. I've covered very quickly, but hopefully not too quickly, note-taking, knowledge building, and essays and assignments with mind mapping. And just to sort of wrap things up, my sort of final thoughts for you are really focus on capturing and structuring information. That's what mind mapping is really going to help you with. So anytime you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with the information you've got to try and learn, or you've got to try and capture, just start by just throwing it into a mind map. Particularly mind mapping software is going to help you to capture and structure a lot of ideas and information without really having to try too hard. And that gives you a great foundation to do a lot of things with. Mind mapping is really great for a lot of things, but of course it's not the answer to everything. It's not going to solve everything for you, but it's a very helpful tool that I think every student should have at their disposal. And every educator should really try and make their students aware of this as one potential way of working. So that wraps up. If there are any questions, I can't see any questions, and I don't, you're a quiet set of participants today, but I can't see any questions. I'll just hold on for a minute or two in case anything comes through. But if you have any questions or comments or feedback about this webinar or about mind mapping or Biggerplate in general, I would be very happy to hear from you. You can email me at liam@biggerplate.com at any time, and I'll be very happy to pick up with any of you who are interested to introduce mind mapping to your students, or if you're a student, if you're interested to leverage mind mapping a little bit more. There's loads of great resources on Biggerplate that you can use and take advantage of, including, of course, lots of mind maps that students around the world have created and shared on our site for you to download and use in your own studying. So still can't see any questions in there. So thank you all for your attention, even though you maybe are a bit of a shy bunch today. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope this has been useful. As I said before, if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. But in the meantime, I wish you all the very best of luck with your studying, and I hope mind mapping comes to play a very integral part of it. Thanks very much for joining me.